Ava Sinclair thought she had her life perfectly mapped out. Marry the respectable man her parents chose, secure the family legacy, and play the part of the dutiful heiress. But when her car breaks down on a rainy night and a mysterious mechanic appears to rescue her, everything she believes about love, loyalty, and her own heart gets turned upside down. What Ava doesn't know is that this stranger holds the key to a decade-old family secret that could destroy everything the Sinclairs have built, and the choice she's about to make between duty and desire will expose lies that have been buried for years. Luke Hart has every reason to hate her family, but when he looks into her eyes, revenge becomes the last thing on his mind. Now Ava must decide. Will she choose the safe path that everyone expects, or risk everything for a love that could either heal old wounds or tear both their worlds apart? If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this story of forbidden love and buried secrets is just getting started, and you won't believe what happens next. The rain drummed against the tall windows of the Sinclair dining room as Ava pulled her car into the circular driveway. She sat for a moment, watching the drops race down her windshield. The black dress she'd worn for the product shoot clung to her tired shoulders. Another day of smiling for cameras. Another day of being the perfect face of Sinclair home. She took a deep breath and stepped into the evening air. The scent of her mother's prized roses mixed with the clean smell of rain. Home should feel peaceful. Tonight, it felt like walking into a carefully set trap. The front door opened before she could reach for the handle. Nadia Brooks, her assistant and closest friend, stood in the doorway with worried eyes. "They're waiting for you in the dining room," Nadia whispered. "Your parents and someone else." Ava's stomach dropped. "Who?" "Ethan Vale, the one your mother's been mentioning." Of course. Ava had hoped her mother's hints about a wonderful young man from a good family were just wishful thinking. She should have known better. "How do I look?" Ava asked, smoothing her dress. "Beautiful as always." "But Ava," Nadia touched her arm gently, "remember you have choices." Ava nodded, though her throat felt tight. Choices. Right. The dining room glowed with soft candlelight. Her parents sat at one end of the long mahogany table, and across from them sat a man she'd never met, but instantly recognized from the business pages. Ethan Vale, 30, successful, and exactly the kind of man her mother dreamed of as a son-in-law. "Ava, sweetheart," her mother, Marjorie, rose with a smile that looked painted on. "Come meet Ethan." Ethan stood and extended his hand. He was tall, well-dressed, with kind eyes that seemed genuinely pleased to meet her. "It's a pleasure, Ava. I've heard wonderful things about your work with the company." His handshake was firm, but not demanding. His smile seemed real. This would be easier if he were awful, Ava thought. "Thank you," she said, taking her seat. "I hope my parents haven't bored you with too many stories." "Only the good ones," Ethan replied with a small laugh. Her father, David, cleared his throat. "We asked Ethan here tonight because we have something important to discuss." Ava's hands found her napkin and twisted it beneath the table. "Here it comes." Marjorie leaned forward, her voice gentle but determined. "Darling, you know how much your father and I care about your happiness and about the future of our family's legacy. The Sinclair name has stood for quality and tradition for 3 generations, her father added. We want to see that continue." Ava looked between her parents, then at Ethan, who was listening carefully but hadn't spoken. "And Ethan's family has built something beautiful with their investment firm," Marjorie continued. "A partnership between our families would benefit everyone. It would secure our company's future and," she paused, choosing her words, "give you a chance at a wonderful life with a good man." The words hung in the candlelit air. Ava felt like she was underwater, hearing everything through a thick, muffled filter. "You're talking about an arrangement," she said slowly. Ethan spoke up for the first time. "May I say something?" He turned to Ava, his expression serious but not unkind. "I understand this is unexpected. It was for me too when our parents first suggested it. I want you to know I'm not here to pressure anyone." Ava studied his face. He seemed sincere. "What are you here for, then?" she asked. "To meet you, to suggest that maybe we could get to know each other before making any decisions. I believe in taking time with important things." Her mother's face brightened. See? I told you Ethan was thoughtful. How much time? Ava asked. Whatever feels right, Ethan said. 2 months? 3? We could spend time together as friends first, see if we enjoy each other's company. No pressure, no announcements until we're both sure. Ava felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. This wasn't the old-fashioned immediate engagement she'd feared. Ethan was offering her space to breathe. And if we decide we don't suit each other? She asked. Then we part as friends with no hard feelings, Ethan replied. I won't be part of forcing anyone into unhappiness. Her parents exchanged glances. Her father nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. More than reasonable, Marjorie said, though her voice carried a note of concern. It shows real wisdom. Ava looked around the table. 3 faces watching her, waiting. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows. She thought of Nadia's words. Remember, you have choices. This felt like the least terrible choice available. All right, she said, we can try getting to know each other. No promises beyond that. Ethan's smile was genuinely warm. I'm glad. I think we might surprise ourselves. The rest of dinner passed in careful conversation. Ethan asked thoughtful questions about her work and shared stories about his own projects. He was intelligent, well-read, and clearly successful. Her parents glowed with approval. When the evening wound down, Ethan stood to leave. In the hallway, away from her parents' eager eyes, he stopped and turned to Ava. I want you to know something, he said quietly. We'll set our own pace with this if you want. I'm not interested in rushing into anything for the sake of our family's hopes. Ava felt a flicker of genuine gratitude. Thank you for that. They exchanged polite smiles, both uncertain but trying to be hopeful. After Ethan left, Ava found Nadia waiting in the kitchen with a cup of tea. How was it? Nadia asked. Better than I feared, worse than I hoped. Ava sank into a chair. He seems like a good man. But I don't love him. I don't even know if I could love him. Ava wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Is that enough? Being comfortable with someone good? Nadia was quiet for a moment. What does your heart tell you? That I want more than comfortable. I want real. I want to feel something that makes me forget to breathe. Ava laughed softly. I sound like a teenager. You sound like someone who knows what she wants. Ava's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. So proud of how well that went. Ethan is wonderful, isn't he? She set the phone aside without answering. Through the kitchen window, she could see the driveway where rainwater pooled in the old brick patterns. Soon, she'd have to make a choice that would shape the rest of her life. She just wished she felt excited about any of the options. An hour later, Ava was driving down the winding road that led from the estate to town. She'd needed air, needed to move, needed to escape the weight of expectations that seemed to cling to every corner of the house. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, and she'd opened her windows just enough to let in the fresh, cool air. The radio played softly, some sad song about choices and roads not taken that felt too appropriate for the moment. She was thinking about Ethan's kind eyes and her mother's hopeful face when her car gave a small shudder. Then another. The engine made a rough sound, coughed once, and died. No, 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 Ava muttered, pulling to the side of the road near the estate's lower gate. She tried turning the key. Nothing. The engine didn't even try to turn over. She sat in the silence for a moment, rain pattering against her roof. Her phone showed 1 bar of signal. She could call Nadia, but her friend would worry. She could call her parents, but they'd send their driver and ask a dozen questions about why she'd left the house. Before she could decide, headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. A truck pulled up behind her, and she saw Heart and Son Garage painted on the side in simple blue letters. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out into the rain. He was tall and lean, wearing work clothes that looked lived in rather than new. A baseball cap shadowed his face as he walked toward her window. Ava rolled it down part way. Having trouble? He asked. His voice was quiet, pleasant. The engine just died, Ava said. I don't know anything about cars. I'm Luke Hart, from the garage. He gestured toward his truck. Mind if I take a look? Relief flooded through her. Yes, please, thank you. Luke nodded and moved to the front of her car. Pop the hood for me? Ava fumbled around the dashboard until she found the right lever. The hood lifted with a metallic groan, and Luke disappeared behind it. She could hear him moving around, the soft sound of his hands on metal. After a few minutes, he reappeared at her window. His cap was damp with rain, and she could see his face clearly now. He had dark hair, serious brown eyes, and strong hands marked by honest work. "Battery terminal came loose," he said. "That's why she died on you. But you've also got a worn belt that's going to give you trouble soon if you don't replace it." "Can you fix it?" "The battery thing, I mean?" "Already did. The belt will need to be ordered, but this will get you home tonight." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tool, then went back under the hood. Ava watched him work through the rain-spotted windshield. His movements were careful and sure. He worked without wasted motion, like someone who'd been solving these problems for years. When he finished, he closed the hood and returned to her window. "Try starting her now." Ava turned the key, and the engine caught immediately, purring like it had never been sick at all. "Oh, thank God," she said, genuinely relieved. "How much do I owe you?" Luke shook his head. "It was just a loose connection. Took 2 minutes." Ava reached for her purse. She had several $20 bills in her wallet. For someone to come out in the rain, fix her problem, and save her evening, it seemed like the least she could do. "Please," she said, holding out the money. "I really appreciate this." Luke looked at the bills, then back at her face. Something in his expression shifted, became more careful. "No need. Glad I could help." He stepped back from her car, clearly ready to leave, but he didn't move toward his truck right away. For just a moment, they looked at each other through the open window. The rain fell steadily around them, and Ava felt something she hadn't felt all evening, a small spark of something real. "Thank you," she said softly. "Really." Luke touched the brim of his cap in a small gesture that seemed old-fashioned and sweet. "Drive safe." He walked back to his truck, and Ava watched in her mirror as he climbed in and started the engine. His headlights swept over her car as he pulled around her and continued down the road. Ava sat for a moment longer, her hand still, holding the folded bills she'd never given him. The warm feeling in her chest had nothing to do with her car starting again. She drove home slowly, thinking about serious brown eyes and capable hands, about the way Luke had declined her money without making her feel foolish for offering it, about how different that brief interaction had felt from the careful politeness of dinner with Ethan. By the time she reached the estate, she realized she was humming along with the radio. The song had changed to something hopeful. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the rain had washed the world clean. Ava woke feeling strangely light, though she couldn't quite say why. She dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, clothes that felt like herself rather than the polished version everyone expected. Downstairs, she found Ethan waiting in the breakfast room with coffee and newspapers spread across the small table. He looked up with a smile as she entered. "Good morning," he said, standing politely. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by early. I thought we might talk." "Of course." Ava poured herself coffee from the silver service. "What's on your mind?" Ethan folded his newspaper and leaned back in his chair. In the morning light, he looked younger than he had the night before, less formal. "I've been thinking about last night," he said, "about what we discussed. I want to make sure we're on the same page." Ava settled into the chair across from him. "I'm listening. I don't want to rush into anything, not because I'm not interested, but because rushing leads to mistakes. Important decisions deserve time and thought." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What would you think about taking 2 months to really get to know each other? No pressure from our families, no talk about announcements or dates. Just ordinary time together." The relief Ava felt surprised her with its intensity. "I'd like that, very much." "Good. We could have dinners, go to movies, take walks, the kinds of things people do when they're figuring out if they enjoy each other's company." "Like normal dating?" Ava said with a small smile. "Exactly like normal dating, which I realize is probably strange under the circumstances." Strange, but nice. Ava found herself genuinely warming to the idea. Ethan was giving her something precious, time and space to make a real choice. They spent the next hour talking about their interests, their work, their hopes for the future. Ethan was well-traveled and well-read. He asked thoughtful questions and listened to her answers. He would be easy to like, Ava thought. Maybe even easy to love, given time. As he prepared to leave, Ethan paused at the door. "Thank you for being open to this. I know it's not the most romantic beginning." "It's honest," Ava said. "That counts for something." After he left, Ava felt lighter than she had in weeks. 2 months to figure out her feelings. 2 months before any major decisions had to be made. It felt like breathing room. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the estate's maintenance app. Routine service needed. Hart and Son scheduled for this afternoon. Ava stared at the screen, her coffee growing cool in her hands. Luke Hart would be back this afternoon. The man with the serious eyes who'd fixed her car in the rain. She told herself the flutter in her stomach was just coincidence, just surprise. But as she went upstairs to shower and change, she found herself choosing clothes with more care than a routine maintenance visit required. At exactly 2:15 that afternoon, Ava heard the sound of a truck pulling into the estate's service bay behind the main house. She'd been trying to focus on product catalogs in her office, but her eyes kept drifting to the window that faced the garage. She waited 10 minutes, then found herself walking to the kitchen for a glass of water she didn't really want. From there, it was easy to see Luke Hart crouched beside the backup generator, a toolkit spread on the concrete beside him. In daylight, without the rain and shadows, she could see him more clearly. Dark hair that curled slightly at the edges, broad shoulders under a clean workshirt, those same careful hands she remembered from the night before. He moved with quiet confidence, like someone who understood exactly what he was doing. Nadia appeared beside her with a knowing look. "Checking on the maintenance?" Nadia asked innocently. "Making sure everything's going smoothly," Ava replied, not very convincingly. "Mm-hmm. Want me to take him some water? It's warm out there." Before Ava could answer, she found herself saying, "I'll do it." She grabbed 2 bottles of water from the kitchen refrigerator and walked across the garden to the service bay. Luke looked up as her shadow fell across his workspace. "Afternoon," he said, sitting back on his heels. "Just checking the generator and the main electrical panel. Should be done in about an hour." "I brought water," Ava said, holding out a bottle. "It's getting warm." "That's kind of you." Luke accepted the bottle and twisted off the cap. "Thank you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Ava found herself studying his hands as he drank, strong and steady, with small scars that spoke of years of real work. "Your car running all right after last night?" Luke asked. "Perfect. You saved my evening." Ava leaned against the doorframe. "I never properly thanked you." "No thanks needed, just doing my job." "Is that what you always say when someone tries to thank you?" Luke's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Pretty much. What if someone tried to pay you properly for going above and beyond?" "Then I'd say the same thing I said last night." He met her eyes directly. "Some things aren't about money." The way he said it made Ava's chest feel warm. In her world, everything had a price, a value, a transaction attached to it. The idea that someone might help simply because they could felt almost foreign. "Do you always work alone?" she asked. "Usually, my dad owns the business, but he handles the office side mostly. I like the hands-on work." "What got you into it?" Luke wiped his hands on a clean rag before answering. "Started helping my dad when I was 12. Found out I was good at figuring out why things broke and how to fix them. Turned out I liked it more than sitting in classrooms." "That's a gift," Ava said. "Being able to make things work again. Everyone's got something they're good at." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? You enjoy the business side of things?" Ava considered the question. "I'm good at it. Whether I enjoy it," she paused. "I'm still figuring that out." Something in her tone made Luke study her face more carefully. "That's honest. My grandmother used to say honesty was the only thing that never needed fixing." "Smart woman." She was. She had this old rocking chair that my grandfather made for her. Nothing fancy, but she loved it. It started falling apart when I was little, and she refused to throw it away. Said some things were worth the trouble of keeping them working. Luke was quiet for a moment. "Did she get it fixed?" "Someone fixed it beautifully. Anonymous craftsman who wouldn't take credit or payment. She never found out who." Ava smiled at the memory. She used to say whoever did it understood that some jobs are about love, not business. Something flickered across Luke's expression, But before Ava could identify it, he was turning back to his work. "I should let you get back to it," she said, though she found herself reluctant to leave. "Actually," Luke said, not looking up from the electrical panel, "if you've got a minute, could you tell me about that vine growing over the main power line? I want to trim it back, but I don't want to damage something your family planted on purpose." Ava moved closer to see where he was pointing. The space between them felt charged with something she couldn't name. "That's just wild grape," she said. "My mother's been meaning to have it removed. Feel free to cut it back." "Good to know." They were standing close enough that she could smell his soap and see the concentration in his eyes as he studied the electrical connections. Professional focus mixed with something gentler. "You read much?" he asked suddenly. The question surprised her. "Yes? Do you?" "When I can. Mostly history, some fiction. You?" "Everything. Novels, poetry, biographies. My grandmother got me started young." She paused. "What's your favorite book?" Luke considered this seriously. "Probably To Kill a Mockingbird. You?" "Jane Eyre. I love stories about people who stay true to themselves even when it's hard." "That's a good one, too." Their conversation felt easy, natural, like talking to an old friend instead of someone she'd just met. Ava realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her about books or seemed genuinely interested in her answer. "Any favorite music?" she ventured. "Little bit of everything. Classic rock, some country, old R&B. Luke glanced at her. "You?" "Jazz, mostly. My dad got me into it. There's something about the way musicians can make it up as they go along, but it still sounds perfect. Like they're having a conversation without words." "Exactly." Ava felt that warm flutter again. "That's exactly what it's like." From across the garden, she heard Nadia calling her name. "I should go," Ava said reluctantly. "But this was nice. Talking, I mean." Luke nodded, his expression careful again. It was. As she walked back toward the house, Ava felt lighter than she had all day. Behind her, she could hear the quiet sounds of Luke returning to his work. Nadia was waiting by the kitchen door with raised eyebrows. "Anything interesting happening over there?" she asked. "Just checking on the maintenance," Ava said again. "Right, and I'm just standing here admiring the weather." That evening, Ava sat in her room trying to focus on company emails, but her mind kept drifting to the afternoon's conversation, to Luke's thoughtful questions and the way he'd listened to her answers like they mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Hope you had a good day. Looking forward to dinner tomorrow night." She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Me too. See you then." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Ethan was a good man making a genuine effort. She owed him the same. But as she got ready for bed, she found herself thinking about books and music and honest conversations, about the difference between someone who was good on paper and someone who made her feel genuinely curious about the world. Meanwhile, across town at Hart & Son Garage, Luke was closing up for the night when his father, Robert, emerged from the office with a tired expression. "How'd the Sinclair job go?" Robert asked, pulling on his jacket. "Fine. Routine maintenance, generators running smooth, electrical panels clean." Robert nodded, but something in his posture seemed tense. "They treating you all right over there?" "Of course. Why wouldn't they?" His father was quiet for a moment, organizing papers that didn't really need organizing. "No reason. Just different worlds, you know." Luke studied his father's face. Robert Hart was usually straightforward, even blunt. This careful dancing around a subject wasn't like him. "Dad, is there something you want to tell me?" "Nothing that matters now." Robert turned off the office lights. Water under the bridge, but as they locked up and went their separate ways, Luke couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Something about the Sinclair family that his father didn't want to discuss. The next morning brought the arrival of Marjorie Sinclair's image consultant, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia, who carried herself like a general preparing for battle. "Posture, Ava," Patricia commanded as they walked through the estate's main rooms. "Shoulders back, chin up. You're not just representing yourself anymore." Ava obediently straightened her spine as Patricia circled her like a shark. "The engagement announcement will bring media attention. We need to be ready for photographs, interviews, public appearances." Patricia made notes on her tablet. What are you planning to wear to the charity gala next month? I haven't thought about it yet. We'll need to think about it. Everything you wear, everywhere you go, every person you're seen with reflects on both families now. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Speaking of which, I trust you're being careful about your associations. Something in her tone made Ava defensive. What do you mean? I mean that every interaction you have will be scrutinized. Coffee with the wrong person, a casual conversation that gets misinterpreted, even something as simple as being too friendly with service staff. It all matters now. Ava felt her temper rising. Service staff are people, not props. Of course they are, but there are appropriate boundaries, especially for someone in your position. Patricia's smile was sharp. I'm sure you understand. After Patricia left, Ava found herself pacing the house like a caged animal. The walls felt closer than they had that morning. Every room seemed designed to remind her of expectations, traditions, the weight of family legacy. She ended up in her grandmother's old sitting room, unchanged since the woman's death 3 years earlier. The rocking chair sat by the window, beautifully restored and gently worn from years of use. Ava sank into it and closed her eyes, remembering her grandmother's voice. Some things are worth the trouble of keeping them working. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Looking forward to tonight. I made reservations at Chez Laurent. Chez Laurent. The kind of place where photographers sometimes waited outside, where being seen meant being talked about, exactly the sort of appropriate public date that Patricia would approve of. Ava typed back, sounds lovely. But as she rocked gently in her grandmother's chair, she found herself thinking about quiet conversations in garage doorways and the way someone's face could change when they talked about books they loved. That afternoon, she watched from her office window as Luke returned to finish the electrical work. He moved with the same quiet competence she'd noticed before, but today she forced herself to stay inside. Patricia's words echoed in her head. Appropriate boundaries. Everything you do reflects on both families now. The problem was, Ava was starting to realize that the boundaries she was supposed to maintain were beginning to feel less like protection and more like prison walls. And for the first time since her parents had announced their plans for her future, she was beginning to wonder what would happen if she decided she didn't want to be protected anymore. That evening, as she dressed for dinner with Ethan, Ava caught herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was polished, appropriate, exactly what everyone expected her to be. She just wasn't sure anymore if it was who she wanted to be. Dinner at Chez Laurent was everything Ava expected, elegant, expensive, and perfectly appropriate. Ethan had chosen well. The restaurant was the kind of place where important people went to see and be seen, where conversations happened in carefully modulated tones and every gesture was deliberate. Ethan looked handsome in his dark suit, and he was clearly making an effort to be charming. He asked about her work, shared amusing stories from his own business dealings, and complimented her dress with genuine warmth. Any woman would be lucky to have his attention. So why did Ava feel like she was watching the evening happen to someone else? You seem distracted tonight, Ethan said gently as their dessert arrived. Everything all right? Ava forced herself to focus on his kind face. Sorry, just a long day. Work stress? Something like that. She took a sip of wine, choosing her words carefully. Ethan, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you agree to this? The arrangement, I mean. You could have anyone. Why let your parents set something up? Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. Honestly? Because I've tried doing things the traditional way. Dating apps, meeting people through work, blind dates set up by friends. It never seemed to go anywhere meaningful. And you think this will be different? I think it might be more honest in its way. We both know what we're considering. No games, no hidden agendas. Just two people figuring out if they could build a good life together. It was a reasonable answer. A mature answer. Ava nodded and smiled, but something inside her rebelled against the very reasonableness of it all. After dinner, Ethan walked her to her car in the restaurant's valet area. The evening air was warm and soft, carrying the scent of jasmine from the landscaping. I enjoyed tonight, he said, and Ava could tell he meant it. So did I. It wasn't entirely a lie. Ethan hesitated, then leaned down to kiss her cheek. It was chaste, appropriate, pleasant, everything it should be. "I'll call you tomorrow?" he asked. "I'd like that." As Ava drove home through the quiet streets, she found herself taking a detour past Hart & Son Garage. The building was dark, closed for the night, but she slowed down anyway. What was she looking for? What did she expect to find? She pulled into the empty parking lot and sat in her car for a moment, feeling foolish. This was ridiculous. She was having dinner with a wonderful man who genuinely cared about her, and here she was thinking about someone she'd talked to for maybe 20 minutes total. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How was dinner? Ethan seemed so excited about tonight. Ava stared at the message without responding. Through her windshield, she could see the simple sign hanging over the garage door. Hart & Son, honest work, fair prices. Something about those words tugged at her chest. The next morning brought rain again, a steady drizzle that matched Ava's restless mood. She tried to focus on work, reviewing marketing proposals, approving product designs, returning calls from distributors, but her mind kept wandering. Around noon, Nadia knocked on her office door with lunch and a concerned expression. "You've been staring at that same email for 20 minutes, Nadia said, setting down a plate of sandwiches. "Want to talk about whatever's bothering you?" Ava leaned back in her chair. "Do you think I'm making the right choice? With Ethan, I mean." "That depends. How do you feel when you're with him?" "Safe, comfortable, like I'm doing what everyone expects me to do." "And how do you want to feel?" Ava was quiet for a long moment. "Alive? Like I matter for who I am, not what I represent." Nadia sat down across from her. "Those aren't necessarily exclusive things, you know. Maybe Ethan could make you feel both safe and alive." "Maybe." Ava picked at her sandwich without much appetite. "But what if I'm settling for safe because I'm afraid to find out what alive really feels like?" Before Nadia could answer, Ava's phone rang. The caller ID showed Ethan's number. "Good afternoon," his warm voice said when she answered. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all. What's up?" "I was wondering if you'd like to do something a little different tonight. There's a jazz quartet playing at the Blue Moon Cafe. Nothing fancy, just good music in a comfortable place. Would you be interested?" Ava felt a flicker of genuine pleasure. The Blue Moon was intimate, casual, the kind of place where they could actually talk without feeling like they were performing. "I'd love that," she said, meaning it for the first time in days. "Great. 7:30? "Perfect." After she hung up, Nadia was watching her with raised eyebrows. "That sounded more enthusiastic," Nadia observed. "He suggested jazz at the Blue Moon. It feels more real than last night." "Good. Maybe you two just need to find your own rhythm instead of following everyone else's expectations." That afternoon, Ava found herself actually looking forward to the evening. She chose jeans and a soft blue sweater, clothes that felt like herself rather than the polished version everyone expected. She was putting on lipstick when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Sinclair, this is Luke Hart from the garage. Your car's belt came in. I could install it tomorrow afternoon if that works for you." Ava stared at the message, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. She'd almost forgotten about the belt he'd mentioned. Almost. She typed back, "That would be great. What time?" "Around 2 if that's convenient. Should take about an hour. Perfect. Thank you." She set down her phone and finished getting ready, trying to ignore the fact that she was more excited about a car repair appointment than she should be. The Blue Moon Cafe was everything Ethan had promised. Warm, intimate, filled with the sound of really good music. The quartet was excellent, playing the kind of complex improvised jazz that Ava loved. She and Ethan found a small table near the back where they could hear the music and talk without shouting. "This was a perfect choice," Ava said as they settled in with wine and cheese. "Thank you for thinking of it." "I remembered what you said about jazz being like conversation without words. Thought you might enjoy hearing some masters at work." The fact that he'd remembered touched her. Ethan was clearly making an effort to pay attention to her interests, to plan things she'd actually enjoy rather than just places they should be seen. As the evening progressed, Ava found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't the night before. The music created a buffer around them, making their conversation feel private and real. Ethan talked about his work with genuine passion, and she found herself sharing stories about the parts of her job she actually loved, The creativity, the problem-solving, the satisfaction of building something that would last. "You light up when you talk about design," Ethan observed during a break between sets. "It's beautiful to see." "Do I?" "Absolutely. Your whole face changes. You should trust that instinct more." It was a kind thing to say, and he seemed to mean it. Ava felt guilty for her earlier doubts. Ethan was trying to see her, to understand what mattered to her. That counted for something. When the quartet started their final set, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, comfortable, safe. "I'm glad we're taking time with this," he said quietly. "I'm starting to think we might really have something." Ava squeezed his hand gently. "I'm glad too." As they drove home separately, Ava felt more hopeful than she had in days. Maybe Nadia was right. Maybe she and Ethan just needed to find their own rhythm, away from their family's expectations and society's rules. Maybe safe and alive didn't have to be mutually exclusive after all. The next day dawned bright and clear. Ava spent the morning in productive meetings, approving final designs for the spring catalog and discussing expansion plans with her father. For the first time in weeks, work felt engaging rather than overwhelming. At lunch, she found herself humming one of the jazz pieces from the night before. Nadia noticed immediately. "Someone's in a good mood," Nadia observed. "I take it last night went well?" "Much better. We actually talked, really talked. About work, about interests, about what we want from life. It felt genuine." And I think maybe this could work. Maybe I was overthinking things." Nadia smiled. "I'm glad. You deserve someone who sees you." That afternoon, Ava was reviewing product specifications in her office when she heard the familiar sound of the Heart and Son truck pulling up to the service bay. Her stomach did a small flip that she firmly ignored. She forced herself to stay at her desk for a full 20 minutes before walking to the kitchen for water. Through the window, she could see Luke working under the hood of her car, the same focused concentration she remembered from before. This time, she made herself wait another 10 minutes before walking outside with a bottled water. "Afternoon," Luke said, looking up as she approached. "Just finishing up with your belt. Should be good as new now." "Thank you for getting it done so quickly." Luke wiped his hands on a clean rag. "No problem. This should last you a good long while." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Ava found herself studying his profile as he gathered his tools, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. "How's the jazz scene around here?" Luke asked suddenly. The question surprised her. "Good, actually. Why?" "Someone mentioned the Blue Moon Cafe last night, said they had live music." "They do. Really good jazz quartet." Ava paused. "Do you like jazz?" "My dad got me into it when I was young. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday. Something about the way they could make it up as they went along, but still make it sound perfect." Ava's breath caught. Those were almost exactly the words she'd used to describe jazz to Ethan just 2 days earlier. The coincidence felt significant in a way that made her chest tight. "That's exactly how I think about it," she said softly. Luke glanced at her, and for a moment their eyes held. Something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, a connection that felt deeper than their brief acquaintance should allow. "Well," Luke said, looking away first, "you should be all set now. Belt's tight. Everything's running smooth." "What do I owe you?" Ava asked, reaching for her purse. "It's covered under the estate's service contract. No extra charge." "Are you sure? It seems like I should—" "I'm sure." Luke's voice was firm but not unkind. "Just take care of yourself, Ms. Sinclair." There was something in the way he said her name, something that felt like goodbye, as if he was creating distance on purpose. "Thank you," she said, confused by his sudden formality. "For everything." Luke nodded and turned back to his truck. Ava watched him load his tools with efficient movements, fighting the urge to say something else, to extend the conversation somehow. As he drove away, she stood in the empty service bay, feeling like something important had just slipped through her fingers. That evening, Ava sat in her grandmother's chair, trying to make sense of the conflicted feelings churning in her chest. Ethan was everything she should want, kind, successful, genuinely interested in building something real with her. Last night had proven they could connect, could find common ground. So why couldn't she stop thinking about Luke Hart's careful distance and the way his eyes had changed when he'd said goodbye? Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. I haven't felt this hopeful about the future in a long time." Ava stared at the message, guilt and confusion warring in her chest. Ethan deserved honesty. He deserved someone who was as hopeful about their future as he was. The problem was, she was starting to realize that her heart might have other plans. 2 weeks passed in a careful rhythm. Ava and Ethan fell into an easy pattern of dinners, walks, and quiet evenings that felt increasingly natural. He was thoughtful and attentive, remembering small details about her preferences, and surprising her with books he thought she'd enjoy. Her parents glowed with approval, and even Ava found herself thinking that maybe this could work after all. But then came the morning when everything changed. Ava was reviewing budget reports in her office when Nadia burst through the door with a strange expression on her face. "I need to show you something," Nadia said, holding a manila folder. "I was organizing old vendor files and found this." She placed a single sheet of paper on Ava's desk. It was a decade-old internal memo about a supply delay that had nearly cost them a major contract. At the bottom, in her father's handwriting, was a note. "Our heart took responsibility. Matter closed." "I don't understand," Ava said, reading the memo again. "What does this mean?" "I did some digging. There was a big problem with a shipment in 2015. Damaged goods, missed deadlines, angry customers. Someone had to take the blame. And Robert Hart volunteered? More like he was volunteered. The real problem was with our warehouse manager, but he had 5 kids and 20 years with the company. Robert Hart was just the delivery contractor. Easier to cut him loose." Ava felt something cold settle in her stomach. "But we still work with Hart and Son." Because Robert never made a fuss, never tried to clear his name or demand compensation. He just took the hit and kept working. Nadia's voice was quiet. "Your dad made sure he kept the smaller contracts as a kind of unofficial apology." Ava stared at the paper, pieces clicking into place. Luke's careful distance, his father's tension when the Sinclair name came up, the way Luke had refused payment that first night, as if money from her family carried some kind of weight. "Luke doesn't know, does he?" Ava asked. "I don't think so, but his father carries it. I can see it in the way he acts around estate staff, like he's always waiting for someone to remember why he shouldn't be there." That afternoon, against her better judgment, Ava found herself driving to Hart & Son Garage. She didn't have a shusha plan, wasn't even sure what she wanted to say. She just knew she couldn't sit with this knowledge without doing something about it. The garage was quiet when she arrived. Through the open bay doors, she could see Luke working under the hood of an old pickup truck. He looked up as her shadow fell across his workspace, surprise flickering across his face. "Car trouble again?" he asked, straightening up. "No, I came to talk to you." Something in her tone made him go still. "About what?" "About your father. About what happened 10 years ago." Luke's expression shuddered completely. "I don't know what you mean." "The supply delay, the contract dispute. My family letting him take the blame for something that wasn't his fault." For a long moment, Luke said nothing. Then he turned back to the truck, his movements sharp with controlled anger. "Ancient history," he said finally, "doesn't matter now. It matters to me." "Why? Because it makes you feel guilty? Because you want to make it right and feel better about yourself?" The words stung because they held a grain of truth, but not the whole truth. "Because it's not right," Ava said quietly. "Because your father deserved better then, and he deserves better now." Luke slammed the hood of the truck harder than necessary. "You think I don't know what happened? You think I haven't spent years watching my dad swallow his pride every time your family calls? Watching him be grateful for scraps when he should have been respected? Then why haven't you said anything?" "Because he asked me not to." Luke's voice was raw with frustration. "Because he said some battles aren't worth fighting, and some people aren't worth the trouble." "He's wrong." "Is he?" Luke turned to face her fully, his eyes blazing. "What exactly do you think you can do, Ava? Wave your hand and make the past disappear? Write a check and call it even?" Hearing her first name from his lips sent a shock through her system, but she forced herself to focus. "I can acknowledge what happened. I can make sure the record is set straight. I can—" "You can what? Make your parents admit they threw a good man under the bus to save face? Make your board of directors apologize for something they probably don't even remember?" His words hit like physical blows because they were true. The people responsible for the original decision were gone or retired. The incident was buried under years of other business. What could she really change now? "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have to try something." Luke stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Why?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because of the way you looked at me that first night," Ava thought. "Because of the way you talk about books and music like they matter. Because you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm more than just a name and a legacy." But she couldn't say any of that. Instead, she said, "Because it's right. Because your family deserves better." Luke was quiet for so long that Ava began to think he wouldn't respond. Then he sighed and rubbed a hand through his hair. "My dad won't thank you for this," he said finally. "He spent 10 years building a wall around what happened. Pushing at it will only hurt him. What if I'm careful? What if I find a way to acknowledge it without making it a big public thing? There's no careful way to rewrite history, Ava. And there's no way to give him back the respect he lost without admitting your family took it from him in the first place." The truth of that settled between them like a stone. Ava felt the weight of generations of privilege, of decisions made by people who never had to live with the consequences. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for what happened to him, for what my family did." Luke's expression softened slightly. "You weren't responsible for any of it. But I am responsible for what I do now, and for what I don't do." They stood in the quiet garage, the weight of old wounds and impossible choices hanging between them. Ava found herself studying Luke's face, the line of his jaw, the way his eyes reflected both anger and something deeper, something that made her chest tight with longing. "I should go," she said finally, though every part of her wanted to stay. Luke nodded. "Probably best." As she walked back to her car, Ava heard him call her name. She turned back to find him standing in the garage doorway, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "For what it's worth," he said, "I believe you want to do right by him. That matters, even if nothing changes." The drive home passed in a blur of tangled thoughts and emotions. By the time Ava reached the estate, she'd made a decision that scared and exhilarated her in equal measure. That evening, she sat down with her parents in the library and laid the old memo on the coffee table between them. "I need to know exactly what happened with Robert Hart," she said, "all of it." Her father's face went carefully blank. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? I need to know the truth." Marjorie picked up the memo, frowning. "This is ancient history, sweetheart. Why are you digging up old business files?" "Because that old business affected real people. Because Robert Hart has been carrying the weight of something that wasn't his fault for 10 years. Her parents exchanged glances. Her father sighed and leaned back in his chair. "It was a complicated situation," he said finally. "We had angry customers, potential lawsuits, a warehouse manager with a family to support. Someone had to take responsibility. So you chose the person with the least power to fight back. We chose the path that protected the most people," her mother said defensively. "Sometimes leadership means making hard choices." "Leadership means taking responsibility for your own mistakes," Ava shot back, "not passing them off to someone who can't afford to defend himself." Her father's voice hardened. "We've kept Robert Hart employed for 10 years. We've made sure he has steady work and fair payment. That's more than most companies would do." "Guilt money isn't the same as justice, Dad." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving. Ava saw her mother's face pale, saw her father's jaw tighten with anger. "I want it fixed," Ava said quietly. "I want his record cleared, and I want it done with dignity. No public spectacle, no media attention, just quiet acknowledgement of what really happened." "And if we refuse?" her mother asked. Ava met her eyes steadily. "Then I'll have to decide whether I can live with being part of a family that values reputation more than truth." The threat was implicit, but clear. With her engagement to Ethan hanging in the balance, with the company's future tied to family stability, Ava had more leverage than she'd ever had before. Her father was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll see what I can do," he said, quietly. "But I won't have you destroying what we've built over a mistake from a decade ago." "I'm not trying to destroy anything," Ava said. "I'm trying to build something better." Later that night, as she sat in her grandmother's chair looking out at the rain-dark garden, Ava felt the weight of choices pressing down on her. She'd taken the first step toward justice for the Hart family, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. Not for Luke, and maybe not for herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Dinner tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss." She stared at the message, guilt twisting in her chest. Ethan deserved honesty about her growing feelings for Luke. He deserved a partner who was as invested in their future as he was. But as she typed back her agreement to dinner, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to set in motion events that would change everything. The next evening found her sitting across from Ethan at a quiet restaurant, watching his face as he talked about his plans for the following month. He was excited about a business trip to Europe, hopeful about their relationship, completely unaware that her heart was pulling in a different direction. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you," Ethan said as their dessert arrived. "I've been thinking about our timeline." Ava's stomach dropped. "Oh? I know we said 2 months, but I'm wondering if we might consider making things more official sooner. Not rushing into marriage, but perhaps an engagement announcement next month. My family is hosting a charity gala, and it would be the perfect opportunity." The words felt like a trap closing around her. Ava forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep her expression neutral. "That's sooner than we discussed," she managed. "I know, but I feel like we've found our rhythm, don't you? And honestly, I think I'm falling in love with you." The confession hung between them, sweet and terrible. Ethan's eyes were warm with hope and affection, and Ava felt like the worst person in the world. "Ethan," she began, then stopped. What could she say? That she cared about him but not the way he deserved. That her heart was elsewhere, with someone she barely knew but couldn't stop thinking about. "You don't have to answer tonight," Ethan said gently, misreading her hesitation. "Just think about it. We could be happy together, Ava. I really believe that." As he drove her home, Ava stared out at the dark streets and tried to imagine a future where she said yes to his proposal, where she married a good man who loved her and built the life everyone expected her to have. It should be enough. It should be more than enough. So why did it feel like settling for half a life? That night, unable to sleep, Ava found herself typing a text to Luke. "I talked to my parents about what happened to your father. I'm going to make sure it's addressed properly." She stared at the message for 10 minutes before deleting it unsent. What was she doing? What did she hope to accomplish? But as she finally drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in her mind. Some things are worth the trouble of keeping them working. Even if she wasn't sure yet whether she was talking about her father's reputation, her arrangement with Ethan, or the impossible feelings growing in her heart for a man who might never be able to trust her family or her completely.